Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Transportation Authority of Marin's Board of Commissioners special meeting today. I'd like to begin with a short chair's report, if I may. We have sorted out geographical representation and various issues, including the enormous willingness of our commission to serve, and created a two-structure executive committee. The members for programming the projects are Diane First, Madeline Kellner, Katie Rice, and Kathleen Sears, and myself, and thanks to all of us for our willingness to serve. The Administration, Finance, Legislation, and Planning Executive Committee will be Ford Green, Gary Phillips, Judy Arnold, Stephanie Moulton Peters, and Steve Kinsey. Again, thank you very much. We're still working a bit on the ad hoc workshop planning committee. There are several considerations. One is geographical balance, and the other is that we need to appoint a committee that does not contain a quorum of either of the two executive committees. We've had a lot of interest in these committees. They're mostly from the two executive committees, and we'll work this all out and make an announcement in the future. Are there any commissioner matters that are not on the agenda that someone would like to bring up? I see none. Do we have the executive director's report?
Yes, good afternoon, members of the commission and staff and audience. You have in your supplemental packet the executive director's report. Just a couple of brief kind of enhancements that I wanted to mention to you. We had a very successful outreach event. We had a booth at the Marin County Fair from when the fair started on the 2nd and ended on the 6th. There are several pictures. One should be at your seat, as well as we're going to invite our intern up to talk a little bit about a survey that we conducted. But I wanted to thank all the staff that volunteered to spend their July 4th weekend, including myself, at the fair booth. We did quite a bit of outreach on our projects and programs, particularly our ramp metering project coming up. Answered a lot of questions. No concerns really were mentioned by the several hundred people that came into the booth regarding ramp metering. The general consensus was it's been done elsewhere. We see the equipment. Why isn't it turned on? It'll help me drive past a ramp with more even flow of traffic getting on the freeway. And we answered questions regarding that project. We had several folks from MTC that came and worked in our booth to answer questions about the ramp metering project. So thank you to them. We also displayed and had workers daily from Marin Transit, thanks to the Marin Transit staff who came and shared their information on transit routes and studies they have underway. And of course, they'll be doing additional outreach and some surveying coming up associated with their short-range transit plan priority setting. So thanks to everyone. We took advantage of the public's desire for getting a cold drink of water and eating some candy to have them do a survey. So we put together a survey. You should have the results. It says County Fair 2014 Transportation Survey Receipts. Just another tool to kind of get a feeling for what people think is important in transportation. And here to present a brief overview of the survey is our summer intern.
Hello, everybody. Met most of you before. I was here last summer, but I'm back this summer. Basically, for the surveys, we had 95 surveys. Of course, they answered. There were a couple hundred people that stopped by, but only 95 were enticed to do a survey. A lot of the answers are kind of general. You know, the biggest problem is congestion. The worst road they thought was 101 or St. Francis Drake. So it's really kind of what you would expect everybody to put. There were some interesting comments, though. A lot of people are really excited about Smart Tweet starting. They're saying that that's going to really help alleviate all the traffic. There are 9 questions, so they're all put here, and then the answers are letters. So every time I got a new answer, I would put a new letter. And the stars next to it are for each consecutive person who put that. So for here, if you go to 1B, congestion and traffic, that was put on 1, then all of these stars afterwards are how many people agreed with that.
So those are our results. I think you're going to hear more of our results today from our formal polling that we did from Mr. Bobby. He's here to present that later on the agenda. I wanted to share this with you and point out kind of what Karina summarized and just use this as we move forward with some of our strategic planning efforts in the fall. So thank you, Tarina. The other thing two other things that I wanted to mention, stay here, please. Two other things I wanted to mention is that you have in your executive director's report a brief mention of our Central Marin Ferry Connector project and plans for some closures of one lane on eastbound Sir Francis Drake for a period during the day outside of commute hours. Now, we have.
I think that happened today, didn't it?
Pardon me?
I said, I think that happened today.
Yeah.
Practice.
Ouch.
We have the project team from the County of Marin and TAM here to answer any questions. They also can describe the outreach effort that's going on regarding this. And in fact, maybe I'll ask Bill or Dave Bernardi to speak briefly about the outreach associated with the closure. We want to make sure that people are well informed regarding this. Bill, can you just talk briefly?
Sure, Dave, if you'd like to join me. Deputy Commissioners, so we are moving forward with construction of the Central Marin Ferry connection where it begins a phase that requires the closure of the lane. So that was been planned, we've been coordinating with City of Larkspur and Caltrans to identify the exact time frame, the method of closure. We've started an outreach program. The contractor's gone around and worked with the businesses. I'd like to compliment them. They've done a good job communicating with the businesses in the area. The county is preparing a press release that will be in papers, be widely distributed through their public information officer. There will be changeable message signs that are posted in the project area. And then we're going to ask Tarina, our intern, to actually go around and do another round of outreach with the people around that area, the businesses. Dave, do you have anything else to add to this?
Well, I think that we've been preparing for this for some time. We've been working with the contractor to get the lane closure details so that we can review them. We've prepared that Bill said press release. It's going to get released tomorrow. And we are going to be working with the contractor to make sure that as this moves forward, that we minimize the impact to the traffic as little as possible. The lane we're talking about, if you can envision it, as you get off the freeway, there's 2 lanes. One lane on the right side goes to the Richmond Bridge, and the other lane kind of goes straight ahead to get back onto the freeway northbound on 101. We're going to be diverting the traffic from the lane that goes to the Richmond Bridge, and we're going to merge it with the lane that is coming through from Sir Francis Road from the Bon Air Shopping Center. So there's going to be a pinch point there that will create some delays, but we're working so that the delays will be minimal. They'll have advance warning in all directions so that they know what's coming up. So that's going to happen the week of the 21st.
28th.
Sorry, 28th. And it'll last about a week. What they're going to be doing is getting drill rigs into the site on the right-hand side of the road in the marsh area so they can start taking their core samples for the actual drilling. That will be one phase. As time goes on, we're going to be doing another lane closure as they either start dismantling the trestle or they start bringing in the big drill rig to actually drill the piers. So this is going to be an ongoing process over the next 6 to 8 months. But in advance of all of these events, we will be having public notice, we'll have press releases, we'll have all the changeable message boards out as this occurs, and there'll be plenty of warning for the public so that they know what's going on.
So
Thank you. What's your question?
I have a question. Just given the timing between the press release tomorrow and July 28th, that's a pretty short time frame. I was just wondering, if we had a chance to discuss with Arts for Public Works any of the proposals you just described, or your vision of how this is going to change things there?
Bill has been in contact with Larkspur, and they're here today if you want to.
Right, I just wanted to make sure they had a chance to ask any questions.
You know, we've been working with Marin Race's staff. He's been out in the field on site almost every day, so that the construction management staff works with him, lets him know what's going on. If he has any questions, we certainly are willing to deal with whatever issues he might have. So that part of it seems to be working pretty well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, are there any further questions or comments? Yes, Stephanie.
Oh,
Vince.
after you, go ahead.
I just had a question about whether we were encouraging businesses to have employees telecommute and things the way we do for bridge closures and Olympics and stuff like that. It's just a thought.
Good, certainly.
Yeah,
I'm telling everybody to tell them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has worked for bridge closures and stuff, and I think we should treat this that way.
You know, you've got Larkspur, but you've got a huge contingent of people that use this from the Ross Valley. We talked about going to those jurisdictions, outreach. Were you able to plan any of that for this week, council meetings? Police and fire are another question I have for you. So can you talk about those?
I'd certainly be happy to come out to the council and make a presentation. By all means, we haven't done it for this particular closure, but we should for the future, because this is going to go on for a while. So that would be a good idea. We failed to mention the website. We have posted closure information on our website. We're working to build a project-specific website that we can continually update and provide construction and traffic impacts and closures that are planned. So we haven't got that ready to go live yet, but we do expect that by the end of the week. We'll try.
There more?
My concern was just about the 3 p.m. and if there's any flexibility in that, the 3 p.m. really is the beginning, certainly 2:30
We
of
agree.
backup.
If it gets too bad, we'll close it early.
Okay.
We worked with the state on those specific time frames that we found acceptable.
Katie, did you?
Yeah, I was also going to ask about flexibility with regards to the closure times, that window. I think that 9 o'clock should be okay, especially as people get used to it. I'm thinking of Ross Valley folks, but certainly that 3 p.m. could be scary. I think that the signboards going up well in advance are actually your best communication method in terms of people planning trips. And then I would suggest, though, that you do reach out to the school districts as well, because frankly, that is a lot of that traffic as well, just so they can give early warning to their parents. What's my other thought? I'm wondering too what sort of impact this will have on deterring through regional traffic, because I don't know if it will or won't, but we might get some pressure off of regional traffic if it ends up making their commute more difficult. But maybe the hours won't impact them. So.
Are there any further commissioner questions? Seeing none, yes.
Madam Chair, Dan Schwartz, City Manager, City of Larkspur. I felt compelled to come today. I first want to acknowledge we appreciate all the work your staff's doing to get this project underway. We know how challenging it is to coordinate the project in that corridor. We know better than anybody else. Your staff's worked really hard to try to extend the lead time on the notification of this closure. By our standard in the city, it's inadequate. It's not as long as we would do, because we need to do outreach on both sides of the freeway for this type of closure. We know that corridor really well. I appreciate that in this case, given the circumstances that they're under, the challenges they have coordinating with the contractor, that may not have been possible. But it's a little bit alarming for us, because we just found out in the last couple of days that this closure is going to occur. The other thing that we know that's really unique about this particular location is we already have a first responder challenge because our fire engines are on the west side of the freeway. And when traffic gets bad on Sir Francis Strait, they already have fears about reaching an incident time. So it's really important that we have enough lead time to plan the deployment of our medical response personnel so that we can deal with the closure. And whether we have to coordinate with Corte Madera and whether we have to coordinate with Santa Fe to ensure there's coverage for what's occurring on the east side of the freeway. So I appreciate that your staff's under difficult logistical challenges, but we'd ask that for future closures would be more lead time than this. It's pretty short by our standards.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none? Yes.
Actually, I just have one suggestion, and it might be something that we've already taken advantage of. The incident this morning, most people heard about that over the radio. Are there tools like that that we can add to the toolbox to make the public awareness, a little broader coverage for that, given the short time period? I appreciate that very much.
The county's public information officer can work with the local TV and radio on that issue.
Just to have a rhythm of those reminders to avoid the area.
Alice?
Thank you.
Yes.
On that same subject, actually, Central Marin Police Authority does a great job tweeting out this kind of stuff and beyond public safety, traffic. But I actually would like staff to look into, as a congestion management agency, if we shouldn't have something actually that's more formalized around traffic and congestion and traffic alerts, because the public information officer is not, that's, I think, would almost say beyond his scope and not something that anyway, I think the Transportation Authority in Marin should be looking at that as the CMA.
Thank you, Katie. Are there any further comments from the commission? Yes.
No, I have one more item on the executive director's report.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you to Lark. Let me just mention that we have, we brought to our attention a bill that is currently under consideration. AB 1193 that has some recent changes. We had a support position. It was brought to our attention the last few days that this bill has been amended. I just wanted to give staff an opportunity to give you an update. We were asked by some of our advocates to bring this up today and just give you an update on what's happening with this bill. So if I may, Dave Chan, could you just very briefly describe what the recent changes and what this bill entails? And then as part of this item, Madam Chair, I have been asked by members of the audience to allow them to comment.
This is not an action item.
No, ma'am, this is part of the executive director's report. I just wanted to give an update.
AB 1193 was discussed at the last board meeting, and the TAM board has voted a support for the amended position. There was a concern that the lead wanted some flexibility with some of this local jurisdiction to perhaps have a different standard than the California state.
Can you describe what the bill is?
Oh, this is, I think it was commonly referred to by a lot of people as a 540 amendment, where there was a proposal that allowed for a cycle track. However, there's much more than that, in that there was this is a bill that allows local jurisdiction to have a standard that's different than the California standard if they opt out and hold public meeting for that. And so this was an amendment that was changed on July 1st of this month. And the lead was concerned about giving that discretion to a local jurisdiction. And the amendment was changed. According to Gus Coy, the lead has dropped his opposition to this bill. And that's the last I heard. This was just happening on July 1st.
So there was an issue, we wanted to support this, there was an issue on liability of local jurisdictions accepting new or using new design standards for bikeways. And it is currently, it's still allowable for local jurisdictions to adopt a separate set of standards, although it was mentioned that the state has accepted the NAPTO standards for cycling facilities. And we're tracking this. The recent changes, Dave, has removed the league's opposition.
Yes.
So that's one thing that you brought up is if there is the league is supporting this, let's keep an eye on that and let's try and support it as well. So we can confirm our support of amended position now. Anything you want to add? And I'd also turn to our commissioner, I'm not sure if I know who's been involved in this, Stephanie Peters.
All right, but I have to say, I looked the bill up yesterday. There was still a letter of opposition posted, and there was no position named.
I see.
Yeah, let me clarify. The league basically said that they would remove the opposition if the bill was amended. They haven't officially said they'll support the bill, but according to Gus Corey, that the league would, at the very least, remain neutral on the bill.
They have a letter that says oppose, and they ask for something that gives cities who adopt their own standards some kind of indemnity. That's what the letter that's currently posted as of yesterday says.
Can I comment on that? Because what has happened is the bill has been modified so that cities have to opt in. That has addressed the concerns of liability. The only reason they're asking about liability is because under the previous bill, the previous version of the bill, they did not want to be subject to lawsuits. But with this new opt-in provision, that's no longer an issue because the city can opt simply to keep things the way they are and not choose other standards such as the NACDO or the AASHTO standards. So if a city does nothing, the city stays as things are today. Nothing changes. If the city decides to opt in by passing a resolution, then they can choose to use standards outside of the California Highway Design Manual.
All right, that was not my understanding of the issue. I really think we need some better parsing of this legislation because the next hearing is not until August, so we have time. And when this is not an action item.
Thank you for the opportunity. We'd be glad to bring this back to you in September. And that concludes my director's report now.
Were you going to give Stephanie a chance to?
No, I concur with you, Alice. I think we have time to look into it and see what our position in the leagues is, confirm it.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not an action item anyway. Is that the end of the executive?
Yes, ma'am. That's my report.
We go on now to Commissioner's report, Executive Committee, Commissioner's report.
There is no executive committee report. Thank you.
That's true, because this was it. Smart report.
Yes, SMART called a meeting of all of the transit agency providers last week, and my understanding from talking to Marin Transit District and the Golden Gate Bridge District is that the meeting went very well, and that both of those agencies, and they said the other agencies that were there, are discussing their participation in the news, in SMART coming in and getting people to the train. So it was good, and they're going to continue having meetings, which they've been doing, but they're going to continue even more now, meeting together. I think their next meeting is in August.
Thank you. On to the MTC report, Commissioner Arnold.
It's really Commissioner Kinsey.
I thought you were giving him a break.
I appreciated her willingness.
My report would have been, there is no report.
That's right. Yeah. Well, my report is primarily focused on the fact that, not unlike painting that beautiful bridge that connects us to San Francisco, we're about to start the RTP, Planned Bay Area process all over again here.
Oh, boy.
Yippee. Actually, there's some better news embedded in that, though. The plan is required by the federal government every 4 years, and so 2017, the plan update has to be updated. But given the fact that we merged the federally required regional transportation plan with the plan that was required under SB 375 that also deals with housing and other kinds of air quality issues. The next plan is intended to be much more limited in focus than the last one. It doesn't have to deal with the regional housing needs assessment or the RENA issues, so that will give it some additional flexibility. And there are 3 areas that have been identified for more focus, and I think there are areas that we'll be very interested in. One is sea level rise. The other is healthy infill, which could address this issue about the air quality of housing in proximity to transportation corridors. And then economic and prosperity analyses and the follow-through on studies that are currently underway with a special emphasis on goods movement. And I think Diane has told us in the past that freight and goods movement is really one of the next sort of sources of prioritized funding. So we don't have a lot of our issues lining up with the priorities for the region around these priority development areas. So we're going to have to pay attention closely to what we might be able to see coming out of the goods movement strategies that emerge. There is an associated study that's going to be presented this week on the 16th, Wednesday, at ABAG at 9 in the morning on a report around economic prosperity, which is a strategic planning process focused, I think, really wisely on middle income job opportunities to try and support the class that's being squeezed from all directions right now. And so if folks can attend that, they're welcome to. It's at the ABAG conference room in Oakland. I'm sure there will be other ways we can get in contact with that information as well. And then I wanted to mention that one of the issues that has consistently come up in discussions around housing in our own county, water supply. The Board of Supervisors on the 29th of July is going to have a presentation made by the 2 large water agencies that serve North Marin and Central and Southern Marin, MMWD and North Marin, to the Board of Supervisors that will lay out their 20-year water supply plans as required under state law and be available to talk to us about that. So if folks are interested in that, I just mentioned that to you. And I mentioned it partly because at Friday, MTC's Planning Committee meeting of last Friday, the city's representative to ABAG, Pat Eklund, was particularly harsh about Plan Bay area, complaining significantly about the loss of local control, about high-density housing, still questioning the numbers related to population, jobs, raising questions about whether vehicle miles traveled is a meaningful metric, and also speaking about her interest in some kind of sub-regional planning process, which I assume is what has been made available in the past for counties that want to tackle the RENA number and allocate it amongst their own jurisdictions rather than having it assigned at ABAG. I think that from my perspective as our representative on MTC, that a number of the criticisms really are misguided in that when we think about local control, which is really a fundamental piece of both SB 375 and the Plan Bay area, in Marin County, 4 different areas that had tentatively been or even actually been identified as priority development areas, we removed those designations based on the request from the local jurisdiction, and that's the way it's supposed to work. There's no question that we are walking away from funding opportunities because of that, but that's exactly the way it's supposed to work. The local communities decide whether they want to participate in these programs. If they don't, they know they're going to have to forego some of the funding opportunities that go with them. As far as, the high-density issues, I think that it's going to be every community's responsibility to figure out how to meet our housing needs, and we can use a wide range of building types. There's nothing being driven from the regional level on that. And as far as water supply, which she seemed to bring forward, I just would be inviting her as your representative of the cities and towns to participate in the discussion at our board to better understand the water supply issues. And I will also say this, that and I think it's valuable information, her presentation, her perspective was not well received by the other commissioners, and there are some very pointed comments that were made by several of the commissioners. So I think we are beginning to experience some reaction to us as a county right now from the other parts of the region that feel like they want to go forward with their own engagement in these priority development areas, transit corridors. And their suggestion is, if you don't want it in your county, that's one thing, but don't make it difficult for us. And so I think it's important for us to know, what we face within the region based on a fair amount of criticism that still is going on in our own county. And I did want to bring that to the whole group's attention. I do think that there are ways for us to address that, but that's it on the go forward. And then under what I probably should have mentioned under Commissioner Matters not on the agenda was a suggestion that we may want to add a committee or commissioner report from our transit district. It's just a thought, but the transit district, 55% of our Measure A money goes into transit. It's in the process of doing a short-range transit plan right now that I think we'd all be interested in knowing how it's proceeding. And we've just undertaken a significant study of school bus service, which, as we know, is a major source of congestion, at least in the morning hours. And so it's just a thought to the chair that you might consider inviting a representative from the transit district board, perhaps the chair, Judy Arnold's the chair at the present time, to make a report. But I think keeping this body apprised of that one is just as important as these other committees.
Thank you. And I think it's a good suggestion. Yeah, okay.
Alice?
Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Relative to the ABAG, in the Plan Bay area, when the vote for the Plan Bay area took place at the ABAG meeting, Pat Eckland is representative for MCCMC, and I'm making these comments in my former role as her alternate. Had not taken a consensus of the towns and cities when she made her determination on how she planned to place her vote. How she placed her vote, what she said, notwithstanding, I reminded her that she had to take a consensus vote and set a meeting up of the delegates from the different towns and cities to make sure she understood what the consensus was rather than what her own personal opinion may be. I feel that the comments that you may have heard, that you commented on this meeting, may have been more past personal opinions rather than reflecting any consensus of MCCMC. Because at the delegated meetings at which I attended, there was significant discussion with the ABAG representative, Brad Paul, the assistant executive director, on the desire for Marin to possibly develop a constructive caucus, so that as this next round of Plan Bay area goes forward, we don't have the conflict-based sort of encounters over these issues that I think were unnecessary. And I'll take as much responsibility as anybody representing Larkspur, but I think the towns and cities could have done with the county a much better job at showing what Plan Bay area should look like for Marin. And most of the issues surround compatibility. So I think Marin actually is a model for what Planned Area is trying to show others to do, in my opinion. And had, for example, just one simple illustration of the information we could have provided to the regional agency. Just to increase the scope of the area in which you're looking at. They really were looking at a very narrow scoping area within along 101, maybe even one property deep on each side in some cases. So I think that area needs to at least get back into the existing downtowns that string along that same corridor. So that more Marin-type solutions for these prototypes you mentioned might be developed. Often surface parking, not just structured parking. Because I think maintaining the patterns that exist here in the county and showing our version, our scale of that can be achieved, and I think all the same goals can be achieved, and maybe model for other areas that are having the same kinds of issues we're facing. So I think there's I'll just say a misunderstanding is often at the core of most problems like this. So let's define our understanding of how we might carry those goals forward as a suggestion. And that was really the message to creating a caucus of the towns and cities so that we could work more constructively with ABAG rather than fight them over.
Thank you. I want to just say that I think those points are right on, and I take it as the MTC commissioner for all of the cities and the county that, and have shared this, and this information was shared very effectively, I think, on last Friday by Chair Spearing from Solano County, that we were not well served. There was a lot going on, but we were not well served by the public outreach and the fact that we had unknowledgeable facilitators in the meetings in local communities. And so we're right now in the process of putting together roundtables with local officials that will help to inform the public outreach and tailor it so that it can be much more context sensitive, if you will, to the local communities. And we'll be reaching out this fall before we begin even the public participation activities next spring. So I do appreciate those comments. And as to, it's also helpful to hear you mention about the MCC-MC representation. Councilmember Eklund was referring to both a meeting that she said she had organized for MCC-MC members, but she was specifically going back to a meeting that she was attending with the Citizen Marin group earlier in the week. And so I think that she, in some respects, is trying to incorporate their concerns into her comments at this time.
Well, my comments are more focused on so much reflecting what is heard at the meetings, because it's often quite emotional. I'm trying to describe what that bridge starts to need to, how we need to start building that bridge with this process, because the goal is to keep funding for the improvements that we have to take place here. And certainly show and strengthen our working relationship with the larger agencies rather than, as you mentioned, we're starting to get a bad rap now because of some of the things that we should be managing better here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to that last point, Steve, I want to thank you for your report. And as the MCC-MC president, I know that I've been in conversation with a number of people in this room about our relationship with ABAG and going forward. And so we know we have some work to do. And I guess I would call on the TAM reps to talk to your ABAG rep as one way to facilitate communication and feedback. And that we'll keep working to coordinate.
Great.
For Marin.
I promise this will be my final comment. But I think it's important to state at the meeting you mentioned that Pat, as MCC, ABAG organized to discuss Planned area, what worked, what didn't, et cetera, and all the delegates were there, as were representatives from Citizen Marin. The most important thing, in my opinion, that took place at the meeting was the description of the concept and the desire to develop a Marin caucus that had a larger voice in the sustainable communities strategy discussion, as opposed to having our ad hoc committee merely a reporting through back to our local jurisdictions. We should be allowed to make suggestions that better integrate what we're doing to the goals of the legislation. He thought it was Brad Paul, Executive Assistant Director of ABEC, thought it was a terrific idea. So I just want you to know that we had that support expressed directly from him at that meeting. So my takeaway from the meeting, as opposed to what you might have heard, was the essence of my perception of that meeting.
Great. Well, as our shared representative on MTC, I'm more than excited to hear that people would like to get more involved like at this early stage, and I'll do what I can to be supportive of that.
Thank you.
And I would hope that if we're talking about a coalition, we're talking about a broader coalition, not only Citizen Marin, but other people in the county that may have a different perspective.
May I
That's
comment
my
on that?
concern with what I'm hearing.
Well, I think it ought to start with our delegates.
I did not attend that last meeting, but I did fill in for our representative on the prior meeting. And it was the ABEG representatives from the various cities in Marin. Brad Paul was there in addition, and then there were a couple of members of the public, one of whom I believe is a member of Citizen Marin. So I believe it's them making the effort to attend as members of the public. I don't believe that there is an effort to include them at the table. It is a table of ABEG representatives from each city rather than, any other organized group or advocates.
Well, the meeting Steve referred to that Pat Eklund organized for the delegates, there were Citizen Marin representatives there. They sat at the table with everybody. Everybody's titles disappeared. We had a great discussion. Everybody was in support of this Marin caucus.
Okay.
idea.
But I think that was, Dan, that was one meeting prior.
Correct.
Right, that's what I said. So 2 meetings ago, I mean, it was, so maybe we need to clarify that before we jump to any conclusions about what role, Citizen Marin is having here, because my understanding is that, this group that's talking, that Pat Eklund is bringing together to start these discussions is primarily the representatives from the city and then a few members from the public who show up.
Well, it was a great discussion, and we did invite Corey Madera to join ABEG at the meeting.
I did not vote to drop out. I was outvoted. Perhaps it will come up again.
But just as chair, I should mention that you're right, there are other groups that are concerned about how we handle the higher densities and where the density should be placed in citizens' plan. There are other groups.
I think it ought to be a big tent.
Yeah. Is there any further comment on this from the commissioners? I've almost lost track of where we are. This was the MTC report. Let's move now to the consent calendar. Would anyone on the commission like to take something off the consent calendar? Seeing no enthusiasm, would anyone in the public like to take something off the consent calendar? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Just a small correction or a question on the minutes. At the bottom of page 10, item 11B, allocation of measure B, in the heading it mentions element 2 of the strategic plan, but in the text it mentions element 3. And I wonder if that's correct, or if element 3 should say element 2. At the very bottom, page 10 of the minutes.
Oh, it's 12 day page 12.
Page 12 of the
Page
packet.
12.
We'll make sure that it's consistent down here.
All right, staff, do we know that?
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the commission for a motion to approve the consent calendar. And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. It passes. I would like at this time to move up item number 12, open time for matters that are not on the agenda. Would anyone in the public like to speak? I think I'm seeing Cindy Winters.
Thank you. I'm Cindy Winter, Green Gray, and I was the one who raised concerns about Assembly Bill 1193. And I want to make it clear at the outset that I do support the concept of cycle tracks. That is not what I'm worried about. But The bill as written now, yes, it permits local jurisdictions to opt out and to stay where they are, they have to opt in. But if they opt in, it permits any local jurisdiction to build anything they want in any way they want. My concern is with the legal language. I think it's very poorly chosen. And I do not support people becoming injured due to design defects and lawsuits rezoning, of which there will be a number if there are no standards to adhere to. So I think the language could be amended to state that Caltrans is the standard to start with, and if Caltrans proves inadequate, then choose ASHTO or NACTO. If none of these standards suffices, probably the project shouldn't be built at all. And I hope that by the time this ordinance meets, the cooler heads go to Cadell and Sacramento, because I think this one clause is very poor in public policy, and perhaps we can do something to work it out so that we're going to vote unanimously to support 1193 in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Yes.
Andy Perry, Marin County Bicycle Coalition. It's my understanding that when, as currently written, when a city passes a resolution on this, they will be required to choose which of the standards that they will be using. So it's not just a willy-nilly, like we can go out and invent things on the fly. And that's really important to us too, because clearly the standards now are extremely outdated, and there's some wonderful innovative kinds of designs that are currently out there now. And the intent and the purpose of this bill is to make it such that cities can use the innovative designs, the class 4 separated cycle track being just one of them. But we want to have that option be there, and we certainly do not want engineers going out and just kind of coming up with stuff on the fly. So that will be part of the bill, and if that language isn't clear now, we'll ensure that it is clarified.
Well, some of us are just sitting here waiting to support it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any further public comment? Seeing none, we are going to close the meeting and adjourn to a closed session at this time.
No.
What did I skip? Oh, geez. I just got so excited. Consent calendar.
Thank you.
Where are we? We're on six. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought those were all set. So this is item 6, review and approval of fund recipients' requests using its own audit team.
Yes, thank you. As part of our Measure A compliance audit, which is done annually, we allowed, starting this year, fund recipients who are being audited to conduct their own audit, as long as they met our standards that are enumerated during the amendment. We had one jurisdiction that requested the ability to do their own audit. That was the town of Ross. The letter is included in your packet. They are one of the fund recipients for this year. They've committed that they can meet our deadline. They're using the same audit team that we use, so that's awfully convenient and assures us of some quality work. And we're recommending that you accept the recommendation from us to do their own audit regarding compliance with Measure A.
I'll move this.
Second.
Are there any, there's a motion and a second. Are there any comments from the commission? Any from the public? Bring it back for a vote. We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Aye. And we move now to item 7, increase not to exceed authorization for program project management oversight services. Diane?
Yes, I'll briefly present this as well. We have been using our on-call consulting team for project and program management for a variety of tasks since TAM was formed, actually, for several years now. Most recently, we needed to use the on-call team for doing some additional evaluation of our crossing guard sites. We also are using the team to help fill some gaps in staffing. We have a need to increase the not to exceed amount of the contract. The work that's being done is included in the budget. It's just with this additional work that's being, we're in a need to use them a bit more now before the end of the calendar year than we had projected. The recommendation is to authorize that we increase our on-call contract amount with CSW by $150,000 between now and the end of the calendar year. And I'd be glad to answer any detailed questions.
So the issue is that although this amount is in the budget to get this work done,
It's
we
not
need
in the contract.
to increase the ceiling for the budget.
We have
On-call
just to expand for 1 second, if I may, we tried to fill a senior transportation planner position. We had some difficulty getting anyone to come to Marin. We had 4 strong candidates that unfortunately turned us down. So we've been able to bring Nick Nguyen, our cameraman over here, on board through our on-call contract to fill in some of the gaps that have been left by that senior planner. We also are negotiating a contract with our planning manager to work part-time. He's filling some of the gaps there as well. And then finally, the crossing guard work, you're going to see a little more detail on that in the next board item. So this would take funds that have been identified in the budget and move them into that contract for us to use.
Any commissioner questions? Yes, Katie.
So that would put the not to exceed amount up to 1.9 million, and that's for this current fiscal year?
No, that's actually a 3-year amount.
It's a 3-year amount, okay. And when did the first year begin? Where are we?
The first year on that was December of 2011.
Okay, so this is the final year?
Correct.
So I'm wondering what other, I think it's a good thing to have the safety net to go to for when we have these needs, but I would really want to, in reviewing the contract and the work that's been done under the contract the last 3 years, and for planning forward, take a hard look at what kind of projects and work we're having the on-call folks do, and whether it's a matter of not being able to fill staff positions, or maybe there's a position in staff that needs to be created, or it's appropriate to rely on call. I'd like to have this concept and program sort of looked at before we embark on a big one, because to me that's a lot of staff time, 1.9 million over 3 years. And I'd like to know more about where the money's going and if it's the best way to be getting jobs done if we have alternatives.
We can do that when we bring this forward in the fall for consideration of an RFP for a new contract.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let me just mention that this isn't 1.9 million in staff support. There are a number of program elements that are managed through the on-call contract, whether it's our dynamic rideshare work, we set that funding through the on-call and hired our team for that work through the on-call. Our project manager for the Narrows, Chief Pander, who retired a year or 2 years ago, he now comes through the on-call. So there's a number of really distinct bulleted items that we'd be glad to share and go over that with you.
Yeah, I'd love to understand it better. Sounds great.
And so, are you comfortable with taking the vote today?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Any further commission questions? Any public comment? Bring it back for a motion.
I'll move it.
And a second. Any objections? The motion carries. We move now to agenda item number 8, approval of crossing guard program.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to introduce Dan Sherrier and James O'Brien. They've been working diligently over the past, 3 months, meeting the requirement under our mentor program to take a look at our crossing guard locations and review them every 4 years. So we have 135 crossing guard sites. We've done a lot of work with your staff at the Public Works level over the past 2 months, and they're going to be describing the process and the results.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to actually let James take the lead with this. I may interject here and there closely if we hear you.
Thank you, Dan. I'm James O'Brien. I'm on that project program management oversight team. Just one of my tasks is to assist with the crossing guard program. The item before you today, item 8, there is information in the original packet, but then the range list, an updated range list is in the supplemental packet, which is kind of core of the item. As Dan mentioned, we are mandated to what we call recertify the locations. We have a master list of crossing guard locations that's been built up since the inception of the program through outreach to schools, both public and private, police and safety organizations, school districts, public works. We do emphasize the movement through public works in that we do consider the crossing guards technically a traffic control device when it comes to something out there in the public right of way. And so that list has now grown to 136 locations. We this year did a little something different with the counts. In order to rank the locations, determine which ones will be above the funding line, if you will, in a ranked list, the scoring is predominantly based on pedestrian and vehicular volumes at each location, in fact, specifically at each crosswalk at each location. So we counted all 135. And so this year we did we used video technology to do the counts. So we had a firm go out and install cameras somewhere between 30 or 50 at a time for 3 days. So we got 3 days. In the past, we've done more kind of hand counts where somebody's out there standing, watching, and keeping track. And we've done that for 1 day. So we did get 3 days of data. We're after usually the peak hour. So the 3-day spectrum is giving us a little bit of range to take out maybe some anomalies. But we do, when we go to score them, we use the peak hour. We put whatever data is in there that gives each location its highest score. We did have some issues with using this new approach. There was a delay in the delivery of the data, and that's pushed us in and out. Normally, we would want to be having this decision before the end of the current school year, because we try to notify the schools for the end of the current school year of changes that are going to occur at the beginning of the fall. Again, that's another one of our policies has been to only make changes as far as the guard location goes at the end of the school year, or the beginning of the next school. Notwithstanding, if there are possibilities that a certain location could be introduced during the school year, and we have a policy for what we call new conditions or change conditions. But for the most part, we try to make the change to the school year, that we are sitting here in the summer session right now. So I appreciate the special meeting from that perspective. The item includes several recommendations. There's the contract with the guard services, which needs to be amended and authorized for the next school year. There is the amendment to an agreement with Nevada Unified School District. We take our wherewithal in having a company that has trained guards and offer opportunities to school districts, schools, anybody really. If somebody wants to come reimburse us for the cost of a guard, we'll use our contract to place that guard and then get reimbursed. That's what the agreement with Nevada Unified is. In this, for the upcoming year, they're going to fund 3 locations. So that's in addition to the sales tax and the VRF money that funds the majority of the program.
James, if I could just interject, what he's referring to are the revised records.
Location had a guard, TAM funded during the 13-14 school year. If it's not bold, it didn't. So the key is on page 4 of 7 of the attachment, on page 16 of the supplemental packet. You can see the bold cut line under 76. So if you look above and you see a location that's not bold, that would suggest that that's a new location above the line. If you look below the line and you see a location that is bold, that would be a location that is currently guarded or guarded up until this school year and is not slated to make the list in the fall. Those bold ones below the line are usually the focus of concern because that's where we're somewhat taking away a guard. Now, having said that, if you count those locations, there's 14 of them. 3 of the locations will be guarded because there's a provision in our policy that allows the local public works director to assign a guard from a location that's above the line to one that's below the line. Swap. We call swap sometimes. While we've tried to make a scoring criteria that takes into account geometry and all kinds of, as close as we can get to engineering judgment, we can't have a scoring that will quantify that judgment for given locations. So we defer at the end to the public works director. If there's some reason that they feel that the guard below, the location below the line would be better served with the spot placeholder from above, we allow it to happen. Again, primarily because we still consider it a traffic control device, and we consider the public works director in charge of traffic control devices in the public right now. So out of those 14, there's 3 of those. There are three of the Novato sites will be those 3 sites that will be funded by Novato. So that's 6 that are kind of taken care of. There's 2 of them below the line that we're voting for that are those 2 pilot locations. So we're down to 6 locations that are kind of losing a guard in the end. And so what we do there is we have reached out, even though we're looking for the list to be finalized today, we did contact schools before the end of the school year to try to get with the principals and anybody who works on their crossing guard program, so to give a heads up. We weren't able to give them the definitive until we get the list approved, but then we'll do some outreach, follow up, and try to catch them in the time before school starts, if they start showing up at the office. So I know most of them like to get notice out to the parents to say the guard's moved or there'll be a new guard or something like that. So we try to do a vigorous outreach to the schools to get them up to speed on that. So this ranked list is based on that process. We had some issues with the data. We reviewed that data with the TAC and then the Public Works directors. We feel that this list represents a kind of a coalescence of reviewing and updating the scoring based on just the second review. I mean, at some points we were even still watching video to do the count again. And then, so the last thing is the pilot locations. I'll just touch on them briefly. The first one is Site 62, Blackstone and Las Colinas. That one we had a little issue with some of the video data. It was about the ability to actually see and see clearly. And we recommended as a pilot because in the past it had been guarded. And we didn't want to take that, we can't really clean up the data now until next year until we can get a new count if we need a new count. So we put it as a pilot, which gives it the 1 year, and then we can get some better data and put it in its ranked place and act maybe at the end of next school year on that. The other was Site 116 is Golden Time Passage. That was a site that had scored above the line in the past when there was a private school there. They're going to open up a new community school, but it's not open yet, so it wasn't open when the data was collected. So we're recommending keeping that one funded as a pilot and then watching what happens once the school comes in.
They always put you up. Not everybody here knows the site numbers. So just to follow up on what they always say, be the one at rank 133, which would be on the last page of the ranked list.
I'm citing that second column, 10 site number with the ranked list. So
that's at the Cove. That's the Cove School that's just opening in Corte Madera. We felt that would be a good location for the guard. We're going to keep the guard out there for 1 year and do some counts maybe the end of next year. And if everybody's using it, then the guard will remain. If it's not being used at all, then we'll reconvene here in about a year. The other one was at rank 85. That was the one Blackstone was lost. That's a still very school in county. And that's had a guard since the start of the crossing guard program, actually. The 3 that Novato Unified are funding, if anybody's curious, is the one at rank 78, Diablo Center, rank 82, Novato and Sunset, and rank 84, San Marin and San Ramon. The 3 that are being swapped that James was referring to is also on page 4 of 7, or in your packet, page 16. The one that's at rank 79 will be replacing the one that's at rank 66, the town of Tiburon. They felt that was a better location to have the guard at Crescent Lane rather than Stewart Drive. The other 2 swaps are The one at rank 100 in Corte Madera, Tamalpais Eastman, will be going in front, will be taking the guard that should have been at Mohawk in front of the school, which is ranked 39. All of these are on the notes, as you can see in that last column. I'm just trying to give you a heads up of what they are. And the last swap was in Nevada. The one that's at rank 107, Arthur at Cambridge, will be going to the one that's ranked 75, the Tinker Way. So what that leaves, well, let's talk positives for a minute. The ones that are brand new, have never had a guard in the past, which is something, is ranked 26, front of the school, full leaders, that's as you go to West Marin. They've never had a guard out there before. This will be a chance for them to be part of our program. The next one that's never had a guard before is ranked 53. That's just south of the San Ramon School. There's an uncontrolled crosswalk there. A score NC high. And the one at rate 63, Novi Albia and Arias, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, will also be new. Those will be the new, those ones will be 3 new ones. Unfortunately, the ones that have had a guard this past year that are not scheduled to have a guard come fall. There's, as James just said, there's 6 of those. That is rank 83, East Blackfield, Buena Vista, is downtown Mill Valley. There's a private school there called
Greenwood.
Thank you. And the next one is Sir Francis Drake in, Butterfield. That's kids that go to what used to be called Lower Brookside School. Now I think it's just called Brookside, but they renamed Upper Brookside. The remaining 4 are in San Rafael. That's ranked 87. Castlewood at 9 out at Glenwood School. 87. Oh, and also 95. Woodland and Eva, that's over at Oradell. And Novi Albion and Monticello, that's at Valesinos Elementary School over by Kaiser Hospital in the area. And the last one is ranked 121 Bridge Street in Bayview. That is a short elementary school, a relatively new school. We put a guard out there a couple years ago. There was some interest to have it, and the coach just, as you can see, it's towards the bottom of the list.
Okay, thanks. So that kind of does it for the list. I did also want to mention a couple other aspects, and I'm referring back to the original mail-out packet. There was an attachment B that kind of showed a select location of things in 2010, 2014 kind of compared. Because we looked at this, and we had a couple changes. We took 3 days of data to find that peak hour. That might have had some impact on some of the scores. But in general, the cut score, using the same scoring system, went from the low 50s to that 76 mark. And in general, that's because overall, the pedestrian, and we count school-age bicyclists as pedestrians as well in this exercise, that just seems to be up, which is the good message. We're building those select locations up in the 30% range. So that's pushed the scores up. And each time we do this, that's kind of the criteria tries to stay pretty objective. And if so we'll get the changes. And then by comparison, I think we had a very similar amount of swing. We had that was 14 being below. I think last time it was 15 or 16 in that same category. So it looks like the process is kind of coalescing that way with the new scoring system. And then having said that, I'll finish with, although some of the tax feedback after the end was some comments on maybe looking at the process, trying to, was this video kind of the way to go, or could we eliminate some of the problems we have with that? So they've asked us, when it starts getting close to trying to do this again, that we run an approach and a plan by them, and I'm sure that's something we'll probably bring to review too at that time. So before we do this again, we'll revisit the approach we take and the methods. So with that, I'll conclude my report.
And if I could just add just one thing to the staff report real quick. And it was already mentioned by James, but this, in the main packet on page 39 of 41, what James was just referring to, he said it kind of fast, but this shows a 30% increase in kids walking. This is direct, the same crosswalk, the same time period, 2010 to 2014. It's showing our safe routes program is working. Of all the metrics we have, surveys and feedback, this is the most direct feedback we have of anything we've done. So I just want to point out that, as we've always said, 25% of the morning traffic is due to school-related congestion. And we've got 30% more of the kids to walk. So for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's because there's crossing guards. We didn't really do an in-depth analysis to weigh all the variables, but it's mostly due to crossing guards, we think, because that's where the action is. It could be part of our Safe Routes program overall, all the educational goals, all that stuff. But there's 30% more kids out there using those crosswalks every day.
Let me also say that you've been meeting with your public works directors, often in schools, oftentimes local police. So we've got a very thorough input from your teams on this. We're not asking you to swap them around, actually, because we've done quite a bit of outreach already. The other thing that I don't know if you've heard, but we did not get data on time, and we got data that was not right. So we spent a considerable amount of money reviewing data with both staff and our on-call consultant to the tune of about $60,000 or more. So we were talking with council on recouping those expenses because we did not plan on that. As a result, the TAP, which is school representation and others, as well as Public Works, had a very compressed period of time. We had an emergency meeting in order for them to review correct data. We did a lot of office visits with them, and they gave us of their time to be able to finalize this list during the summer for the change before the school year. We did this once before. We did this 4 years ago. We were very nervous approaching that regarding taking a guard away, but we did a lot of consultation with schools, notice to parents, etc., and we all survived it. So we believe these changes are, with our communication protocol, we can manage in this time. So I just wanted to throw a few thoughts in there. Yes.
I have a question about one of the line items. It's number 57. Mohawk in front of the high school. I understand the report recommendation is to relocate that guard and policy.
Right. We've actually done it for the last 4 years. The reason being is the school district funded guard at that site.
Okay, well, I just wanted to notify at Neil Cummings, there are 2 crossings, one and then one of those another. Is this data incorporated?
Yeah, that one has a guard. If you look at break 44 of the next page, Hickory Avenue, that's the side of the school.
Thank you.
Yes, Kate.
So I have 2 concerns. One of them is incentives and the other one is safety. As Dan noted, it's fantastic that biking and walking has increased by 30%. That's obviously important for us to try to deal with our traffic issues and for a variety of reasons. I think it's going to be hard to make that stick if those kids walking and biking don't feel safe. With the change of the scoring, I see that there's 21 sites that would have qualified for a crossing guard last year, if I'm understanding the scoring correctly, and don't qualify now. Those would be the ones on the list from rank number 77 down to 98. So I'm quite concerned, because if we have a 30% increase, I'm assuming that didn't happen at just 1 to 3 or 5 sites, it's probably happening everywhere. So it seems possible to me that kids biking and walking at sites 77 through 98, there may be more of them. And they're not going to have a crossing guard, although they would have last year. So I'm really wondering if we've looked as comprehensively as we probably should be doing at additional funding, so that we can make sure that kids everywhere are as safe as they can be. And we're not just doing a numbers game. This is about an increase in biking and walking that we want to make sure continues, and it's the safety of the kids.
Well, yeah, that's true. Last time the Scott score was 52. And now it's risen to 71. Okay. And as you correctly surmised, that goes down to rank 100. To get down the old cut score. We are constantly exploring new funding sources. As you know, our ad hoc, to use that recent money from OBAG, recommended funding another 2 guards on this list. Otherwise, the cutoff score would have been 2 further up even. And the other thing we're doing is we look at new funding. Our TAC would like to explore, and also staff, the idea of some sort of shared funding with the school districts now that things are recovering a little more, maybe with some of the towns or something, to do kind of a shared funding to kind of stretch the leg as much as possible with any new funding sources.
So you're having those conversations with the schools already to see if we can cover it down
Not with
to
the schools,
100?
having with our TAC to come up with a plan of how we go about that.
How about just having the conversation? See if there's money out there. I mean, we're coming up on school season soon, right?
No, that's correct.
Part of our outreach that we're going to do over the next month, we'd be glad to prompt schools to consider funding their own guard sites.
Thanks, great idea.
One thing regarding the history, when the Measure program was created for this, there was an estimate of us funding 70 guards, and we had 82 sites. We have 136 sites because schools have turned their guards over to us. We have a well-managed program, we have excellent attendance now, and we have a good provider. But we have too many sites for the money we have. But let us have those conversations, encouraging the schools, and then, as Dan mentioned, over the next year, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, we can develop through our technical advisory committee a process for shared cost program, where we might be able to stretch our money a little further by possibly funding half of the guard. And we can consider that in the future.
So it'll take 6 months to come up with a process, and that'll put us halfway through the school year.
Well, the difficulty with that is that in order to free up funding to be able to do a half a guard, we're going to have to take it from this list. And we've worked towards finalizing this for the coming school year with the TAC and Public Works. And we could, where is the money coming from that lets us stretch the funds? We don't have any new fund sources.
I mean, I think there's a lot of different conversations to be had, and I'd hate to see us just talk about process for 6 months if there's a way to start conversations sooner and see what some of the options might be. That's all I'm
We can
suggesting.
start some conversations over the next 30 days.
That'd be fabulous.
We don't have a known fund source to be able to offer a
Understood.
50% program, but let's get the
It's a
conversation
conversation.
going.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if you are going to be working with, speaking of safe routes to schools, with them about this list and getting that information out, because one of the things that we talked about on our task group was just how interconnected a lot of these pieces are.
Yeah, we're, going ahead, we're trying to coordinate the crossing guard program more as an integral part of safe routes that kind of coexisted with occasional interaction. But starting last year, James started going around to all the safe routes task forces with a little crossing guard presentation. James, you did about 4 of those?
Yeah, I think I did most of the task forces.
Yeah, all the task to try to get more interactive with the task forces. We'll probably need to keep up with that a little more, but we made a concerted effort last year to really integrate ourselves into the safe routes, program.
But I guess what I'm saying is, given this is July, school starts in August, as a new parent or somebody who's moved to an area, it would probably be good for them to know what is available. So part of that whole orienting process for families, so they know what the score is here, what's covered and what isn't. It's really something we talked about travel.
And you have those, and we have the travel plans that they're providing to parents, the route maps and the travel maps for certain neighborhoods and how to get to the school, and the crossing guard centers are on there. So we have information out. Now, those travel maps aren't available yet for every school, but when we do provide them, we put that on. But we do independent communication with all the schools that are affected by this rain, whether we have a travel plan or a safe routes program there or not. But when we have a safe routes program active there and a task force active, the information is integrated. So,
So along the same lines, I wanted to ask one, with the circle back to the town's DPW directors, did you get feedback from everybody?
We're still, Sandra Fell wanted to review all of the data, all of the video, which takes a long time to do before having our conversation. There's a chance, and that's why we kept open the action about the swaps, is there's a chance they have one new location above the line and 4 locations that had a guard last year, they're now under the line. They may want to swap one of those up, and so that this list may change ever since that.
But otherwise, the other cities and towns in the county, Brown Incorporated, did get back to you
Yes.
with regards to changes. And okay, that was one question. I just wanted to make sure that, and I think it's important, and I also think it's equally important with regard to the conversation we just had about circling back with the schools and specifically the safe routes teams, because those folks and the DPW directors have the best sense of, whereas the rank score may reflect one thing, they know what's like on the ground. And I know you try to create a criteria that can best measure things, but there's nuance. And then my last question was about the TAC itself. Is that all, do you have all the seats filled there? And is everybody participating when because that's an important body, also first level.
We had a vacancy for quite a while for the person representing business organizations. Otherwise, the TAC is completely full for all the regular members. There's a couple of alternate roles that are still there.
And you get good participation?
And we've been advertising for that one vacancy, and we haven't been able to fill it.
Okay.
And but we have never had trouble making quorum.
Great.
Yeah.
Very good.
And it's a total of 14 members and 14 alternates. So it's, we're looking for 28 people.
Thanks.
Did you contact the Marin Economic Forum?
Yes, we had someone from there who was, and then she went to the Devano Council. It was Denise Athens. She was on our TAC, but then when she got elected, our TAC, bylaws prohibit someone from serving on the TAC as also an elected official, so she had to resign.
Yes. Just very quickly, can you remind us what the annual cost of a crossing guard is?
The annual cost
Is it 13?
is what's in the recommendation. It's $13,500 per guard per site.
Okay.
And we have, this next year with the pilots, we'll have 81 locations. And we also have to do some of the summer school, which we tack onto that. That's for 180 days per site. And then we have a program where we'll pay for the guard to use the bus to get to work. And we put another $25,000 in for that. So that's why we come up with that number you see in the recommendation. I think it's 1.5 million.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the commission? Open it to the public. Any comments? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Steve Lamb, by the way. I live in San Anselmo. I have a couple of questions. One is, can a town kind of mid-year, decide to do a swap if they find out that one site, or how much, I guess, freedom do they have to make those kinds of decisions? That's one question. The other question is more kind of a theoretical one. Is I'm kind of imagining, is there such a site that without a crossing guard, it gets no activity, but if it had a crossing guard, it would get a lot of activity? Is that something in the crossing guard world that is possible? Those are my questions. Thank you.
I think staff can handle it.
I'll answer the number 2 first, and James, James actually involved in public works, right? But we originally did a few locations where we went under the assumption of kind of guarded it, and they shall come, and they didn't come. We had about 5 locations that were that way under the. We did those in 2008, and then by we did the codes in 2010. Those were part of the 18 that fell below. Every one of those fell below the line. We found that guarding helps encourage more people to come, but if it's not really be used at all, putting a guard out, we have found at the few places we tried, maybe there's other sites where that's not the case. It doesn't really get that huge mass of people. People are traveling, other companies, there's just more of it. It doesn't cause people to really change their routing at that much.
So that was the question too. I'll take that. I also had the question too that when Diane mentioned those maps at the safe routes, people that we do on a day-to-day, we operate kind of independently, but we certainly try to mix the messages in so nobody's getting 2 messages. And the crossing guard program, we usually defer the others because the safe routes program is so integrated with the people involved, you'd be remiss not to take advantage of it. Those plans, those route plans, that would be your opportunity to test that theory. Right? We didn't give any out. We didn't say, hey, there's gonna be a guard here, come on down and cross. But those route plans do. When they show where the guard location is, they could build into their message, walk the extra block and get down to this location, or take the different route. And I think that's just starting now to go, listen, as those route maps get dispersed more, when we get full coverage of that, then we'll have a vehicle to get that message out in a way that's educational and promotion and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's probably where that part comes. It didn't work so good for us in just putting in counting, but weren't able to take that outreach part. The first question was, can you swap mid-year? We haven't had that, and it's an interesting question because we do defer to the public works directors. However, I would say that falls into, we did make a provision in the policies called change conditions or new locations, and how to deal with that. And our goal still was from TAM to not remove a guard during the school year. Just out of habit. I think that, and I do think that's important because the habit, you want to build a habit, is you put one there and start moving around. So what would be possible would be if it was a changed condition that the public works would present, the policy allows for us to say, okay, sounds good, we will fund that for the portion of the remainder of the current year. In that time, try to bring it up to snuff with the change locations, whether it means new counts or something, and then rank it at the end of the year so that if it did happen to bump off, like the new place wanted a guard, we'd get a guard for that half a year if it had substantiated change conditions. And then if it ended up scoring higher above the line, it would, at the end of the year, bump a lower scoring one off. So always trying to get back to the range, sliding list, how many locations. So it would be possible. I don't think we would have a swap. We would probably have something more along the lines of those change conditions, which is a policy we adopted a couple of years ago.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission for a motion to authorize the director to take recommended action. Any objections? Seeing none. We are moving now to number 9, results of the transportation survey.
Yes, thank you. At our June 26th TAM board meeting, you heard preliminary results from the transportation survey conducted on transportation needs. Brian Godby of Godby Associates presented those results as preliminary. He's here today to follow up with the final report regarding those survey results. Remember that our poll was a combination of repeating some questions that were conducted in 2004, then 2010 polling, as well as exploring new issues and new revenue options and the public's receptivity towards those. So I will turn this over to Brian, who's going to be doing the presentation.
Thank you, Diane, and Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm pleased to be here today to present the full results, or at least a summary of the full results. The full results are thousands of pages, and we have comparisons with previous data. We're just going to get the highlights today in deference to time. As you know, we were authorized to look at a variety of different issues, some of which Diane referenced, beginning with assessing issues of importance in Marin County, looking at the most important transportation issues, gauging satisfaction with transportation options, facilities, and services. We also did an importance methodology, which is called derived importance, and we'll see that when we get to that point where we can compare the importance of a particular item with the satisfaction level. That's particularly important for decision-making purposes. We looked at potential support, or at least initial support for a sales tax measure. This wasn't an entire revenue measure study, so it's just a little bit of a glimpse of that. We looked at some projects that might be funded by sales tax. We looked at the daily commute behavior and preferences, and then, of course, there's a wealth of demographic data. This was a telephone survey. The universe was likely November 2016 voters, so that's the broadest turnout that we would see in a 4-year cycle. It's not everybody, but it is just about. We also had a subset, as we looked at before, of November 2014, and they're in concentric circles. The 14 universe is entirely within the 16 universe. We were in the field from June 17th through the 29th. Portland interviewing is becoming more challenging, so it's taking a lot longer than it used to. If we do this in another few years, this will probably be a mixed methodology study. We just found the internet out because people aren't answering their landlines anymore, as I'm sure we all can attest to. The average survey was 22 minutes long. Sample size then was 750 for the likely November 16 universe, and within that, 600 for the likely November 14 universe, giving us the error rate of 3.6% in November 16, that should be, and 4% in November 14, that should be. Sorry about the typos there. Moving into the key findings, the first area that I mentioned is the issues of importance. This was a relatively long list, and what we did is we presented this list in a random order to the respondents and asked them if they thought it was an extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not at all important issue in Marin County. Not only were they randomized, and so they're not in the order you see here, but some of these were summarized a little bit so they fit on the slide. Once we get the data back, we then assign numeric values, and you see those across the bottom of the slide in an effort to make it easier to compare them, or at least rank them and to determine what the most important things are. So we assign those 3, 2, 1, 0 numbers that you see with the response category. That then gives us the ability to rank the items and then create a tier system, which each tier is defined by 0.2 difference from high to low. And that makes sense from a statistical perspective. And each grouping is essentially the same from a statistical perspective. So instead of saying one item is just a little bit higher than more important, you can really say, here's the group of top items, here's the second group of items, etc. So in that top tier, we have protecting the environment at 2.3. That 2.3 also equates to 82% extremely or very important. In that tier, we also have equal access to affordable quality education, funding local services such as police, fire, and parks, equal access to affordable quality health care, and supporting the economy, including increasing local jobs. The last one is that 2.10 equates to 73.5% at least, or 73.5%. Extremely and very important. So you can see with the error rates, they're really about the same from high to low within each tier. In the second tier, we have reducing traffic congestion and addressing homelessness. And then in the third tier, we have reducing impacts of climate change like sea level rise, preventing local tax increases, constructing bike and walking paths, creating new housing, including affordable housing, and then improving bus service. And the final tier is reforming government employee pensions and providing easy access to the country. The next question we asked was satisfaction at a broad level, and we asked people, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the transportation options, facilities, and services in Marin County? We then drilled down and said, is that very satisfied or somewhat satisfied? Same thing on the negative side. You can look at that at the individual level for those responses, or you can aggregate it correctly to satisfied, dissatisfied, which is sometimes easier. So we got 62.6% satisfied versus 31.5% dissatisfied. A little less than a 2-to-1 ratio. And that's not bad. When we do resident satisfaction for cities, which we do from time to time, in some of the cities here who've done that, you typically see higher scores than this. So this suggests there's some work to do in terms of overall satisfaction with these facilities. And that's obviously part of the purpose here and part of what we'll drill down into.
Mayor, or Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Just to illustrate both the interpretation and the presentation, just to put a slightly different potential angle on the information. Do you think that if you asked a question regarding satisfaction with transportation options to somebody sitting in their car at a peak period of traffic on 101, you might get a different answer than asking them in some other environment?
I think it's likely that might happen. But if you hang on, you're going to see what those people sitting in 101 told us later on. And so that's why I said it's likely, because you're going to see traffic congestion on 101 as the top. So I don't think it's going to be a big difference.
I just wanted to expand the universe there for a moment.
So the next question that we asked was an open-ended one, where we're not suggesting the answers. This is the list they gave us, not the list that we gave them. We'll do that more later on. And we said, what's the most important transportation issue in Marin? And with that in mind, and the previous question sort of foreshadowed this, reducing traffic congestion on 101, 35% said that's the most important problem. Now that's, again, them coming up with that. That's not us saying how important is this. And that's clearly in the top tier. Open-ended questions, there's coding that goes on here, so they didn't all say reducing traffic congestion on 101. They might have said 101, they might have said congestion on the freeway, and we coded all those things together. The second tier then is reducing traffic congestion on local streets and roads at 17% and improving local bus service at basically 10%. And then Smart Train is not finished at 9%. And then from there, we've got a whole variety of items that are in the 3s and lower, which could be 0, could be a little higher, but statistically speaking, they're not pretty significant. That's typical with an open-ended question because, again, they're coming up with responses, not something to accomplish. The next question was a follow-up to that, and it was essentially, would you be willing to pay to solve the transportation problem that you identified? And we didn't say how much you would pay or whether it be a sales tax or a parcel tax or a property tax or anything else. We just said, would you be willing to pay? And we found 57% said yes, 35% said no, without any specifics on what it costs. That's pretty good, I think. Now, we're solving their problem in this question, but we're not saying how much it would cost to solve their problem. So they're pretty open with that, I think. The next set of questions was, in fact, a set of questions, and each one of these items that you see here summarized in order to fit them onto the slide were asked in a random order. And we asked people, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with each of these things? We then drilled down, and is that very satisfied or somewhat satisfied? Same thing on the dissatisfied side of the equation. When we're done with the process, we go back and assign numeric values to each of those response categories, and you see those across the bottom. 2 is very satisfied, somewhat satisfied is 1. 0 is the midpoint, somewhat dissatisfied is -1, and very dissatisfied is -2. So that gives us a scale that ranges from a -2 on the bottom all the way up to a +2, and everywhere in between, and gives us the same fairly nuanced ranking that we talked about before. And what we are able to do is then look and create those same tiers that we talked about that, again, have about a 0.2 difference from high to low. And what you see here is some interesting findings. The discussion you just had about crossing guards was certainly well received. That's the thing that they're most satisfied with. Crossing guards are important crosswalks around schools at 1.28. That equates to 76%, at least somewhat satisfied when we add the satisfaction together. In the second tier, we have maintained bike and pedestrian paths at 0.91 on this previous scale, equating to 73%, at least someone more likely to support the measure.
And
Also
that's
in that
mountain bikes, excuse me for interrupting, they could,
maintain
maintain.
bikes,
See
yeah.
it by last.
Sorry, it's so small, it does sort of look like mountain bikes. It's hard to fit it all in one slide.
While we're broken the presentation, will you explain that versus the one before where there was only 1 per 7.7% reducing congestion on schools?
Yeah.
The anomaly between
The
those
difference is, the previous one, we're asking them, what's the big
What's your
transportation
take?
problem?
Yeah.
What's your take?
Got it.
And we're getting their response, and it's their top of mind response. Now, maybe because they just got off the freeway after rush hour traffic, and that's why they said 101. In this case, we are prompting all of these things.
Okay.
So these are things, oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
Gotcha.
I'm satisfied.
Perfect, thank you.
With those. Now, and there's a little bit of difference in the question too. This is satisfaction. The previous question is how important is it? So rounding out the top, second tier rather, is sustain and enhance safe routes to schools, sustain and enhance special transit for seniors and disabled, and safe and accessible walking routes to bus stops. Those are all in the second tier, ranging from 73, at least somewhat satisfied, to 66%, at least somewhat satisfied. Jumping down to the bottom of the third tier, that fun bus bike pedestrian connections to ferry and hubs, transit hubs, at 0.5 is 56%, at least somewhat satisfied. So you can see that it's going down dramatically. And I won't go down each item except to jump to the very bottom again because of the question earlier. Reducing traffic congestion on Highway 101 is the thing that they are the least satisfied with. And that's a -0.35. That equates to 39% satisfied and 56% dissatisfied. So that is becoming, as we go through this data, one of the key issues. Now, I said earlier that we did a derived importance. There is a way, the simple way to do importance and satisfaction is to ask this whole list that we see here and say, how satisfied are you with these? And then ask it again and say, how important is each one of these things? It takes a lot of time, and on the phone, people get really bored and they hang up. And we have enough problems with response rates that we can't afford to do that. So what we do is we create what's called a derived importance. And what that is we take this data and that overall satisfaction, and we correlate them, and we create what's called a Pearson R-score. You'll have to ask my stats professor what that means. But it's a really good way of simulating how important things are so we can then do the following. And this is really complicated to look at, so I'm going to skip over it in a minute. But what it essentially does is it uses that correlation of importance, which you see is on the bottom. On the right-hand side, it's more important. On the left-hand side, it's less important. And the satisfaction scores that we just looked at, which is on the vertical axis, at the bottom, it's less important. At the top, it's more satisfied, and at the top, and less satisfied at the bottom. So it creates these quadrants, which are arbitrary. The quadrants are simply, those lines are created by averaging the high and low scores on each dimension. There's no set in stone magic about that. It's just the best way to do it. And in the upper right-hand quadrant, those are the things that people say are important, and they're satisfied with. In the lower right-hand quadrant, those are the things that people say are important, but they're relatively speaking less satisfied with. So that lower right-hand quadrant is the area you need to pay attention to. The other two quadrants, because the importance is less, relatively speaking, if you had all the resources in the world, you could fix all of these things. But since you don't, really it's that bottom right-hand quadrant that we want to focus on. And to make it make more sense, we have in this chart, now that you understand it conceptually, the items that are in green are in that upper right-hand quadrant. Those are the things that are important and they're satisfied with. And those include funding for bus, bike, and pedestrian connections to ferry and transit hubs, sustaining and enhancing safe routes to schools, sustain and enhance specialized transit services for seniors, improve bike facilities at local streets and roads, and provide safe and accessible walking routes to bus stops. So those are the things that are important and they're satisfied with. The items in red are the things that are important and they're relatively speaking dissatisfied with. So those are sustain and enhance local and regional bus services in general, provide incentives to Marin employers and employees to encourage alternatives to driving, reduce traffic congestion on 101. Again, we're seeing that as part of the story here. Fund expanded bus routes to local schools and schools countywide, and reduce traffic congestion on local roads. So those are the items that are important, but they're less satisfied with on a relative basis. The items that are all in black fall into those other two quadrants, so they are less important at one level of satisfaction. Any questions about that? This is the hardest slide, really, these two, for people to understand on the fly. I realize some of the slides, a little bit of study and make more sense.
Pretty clear.
Okay. So moving on, as I said at the outset, we did have a question about a sales tax measure, and you can see the wording of that measure on the box on the right-hand side of the slide. What you see here then is the data for the November 2016 universe, which is the entire universe, the larger one, was 67.6, which for a sales tax measure that requires 2/3, that's a great place to start. There's no question about that. If we were in the November 2014 environment this year, it's slightly lower at 67%. Statistically, there is no difference between the two numbers. So those are certainly a good place to start. Very good place to start. The follow-up question dealt with how likely are you to support this based on any given feature. And what we did is we read this item, this list in a random order, and then said, does this make you more or less likely, and then drilled down, is that much more likely or somewhat more likely, same scoring that we had before, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2, of which you only see part of the responses because things are all positive at one level. And then we create the tiers again. At the top of this list is, in Tier 1, reduce traffic congestion on Highway 101. That 1.08 equates to 72%, at least somewhat more likely to support the sales tax measure if that's what the money's used for. Number 2 on that list, and virtually at the same level, no or low-cost senior transportation options, 0.95 equates to 68%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. Fix potholes and maintain major streets and roads at 0.92 equates to 68% as well. And then support for whistle-stop wheels and other local senior services at 0.89 rounds out the top tier at 64%, a little bit lower than the top one, but all statistically in the same tier. There's a variety of other items on here. I won't take your time up to read the entire list. Tier 2 starts at that same 64-65% level and works down from there. Tier 3 starts at the 57% level, so for a 2/3 measure, the items in Tier 3 and Tier 4 aren't as salient or as important to the respondents. And then you can see what those items are as well. Now, had this been a revenue measure survey, as we've done for some of your cities as well for this agency in the past, there'd be a series of positive arguments, there'd be a series of negative arguments, and then there'd be a second test to do that here. So we have a good idea of where we start, we just don't know what happens. But it's a very, very good place. Some of the other questions that we asked: mode of transportation to work. You can see that 63% in round numbers of the likely November 16 voters drive alone. Probably not a surprise. 7% in round numbers take public transit, bus or shuttle of some sort. Another 8% carpool or van pool, and the rest are small numbers. The duration of commute to work or school, it was actually a wealth of data. If you look at the crosstabs, you'll see each one of these responses is by the individual number of minutes that they gave us. So there's a wealth of data, and you can slice it a million different ways. Your handout actually has one way in the lower right-hand corner, and I matched
Brian, I'm
the
sorry,
chart.
can we go back to the slide previously? I missed what the percentage was on the public transit bus and the
Yeah,
printout.
6.8.
6.8, great, thank you.
Yeah, I think on the printout that you have a conflict in.
It's the generic.
Yeah, between versions of PowerPoint, you think that they would all work together. but they don't. So this breaks down in one fashion, but there is a wealth of data, so you can cut this wherever you want it to cut it. Here you can see that less than 29 minutes is 42%, and more than 30 minutes or more is 58% of the respondents. What's interesting in the difference between the little box in the right-hand corner on your handout and here is it depends on where you put 30 minutes. There's 14% of the population that are 30 minutes. So if you put it down with 29, that one jumps up. If you put it up with the rest of it, it jumps down. The data is the same, it just is where you draw the line. And I wanted to make the line match the chart as opposed to something else. So, gives you an idea of how long commutes are. The next question is of drivers only. So this is only of those people that say they drive alone to work or school. And then would you have a preferred alternative if you did something? 29% say bus or ferry, 26% carpool or van pool, and unfortunately 27% of the single drivers say no.
Brian, were they prompted with answers, or was this an open question?
No, this was a pre-coded but essentially open-ended question, so we didn't read the whole thing. And then of those people that said that they would consider some other kind of transportation for, again, the drivers only, but just the ones that would consider something, we asked them what factors would encourage that use. And top of the list, not surprising because we see this all the time, is better schedule for transit at 26% in round numbers. Then carpool incentives from my employers, some schedule, convenience, and money are really the top two items here. Incentives at 13%, and then a variety of other items, but at much lower levels. So that concludes the review of the data. As I said, there's literally thousands of pages of crosstabs and more detail, and there will be a more detailed report as we've done in the past. We want to give you a summary of the data as quickly as possible. Happy to answer the questions about that.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for the report. We worked a lot together, and so I'd like to ask you a question that really was, it's not really apparent to me that you might have had the experience of that. On page 9, it talks about satisfaction. All the responses except for the top are somewhat satisfied.
This ranks sort of middle to bottom of that list, and there are a lot of other services like parks and police and those sorts of things that in the San Rafael survey that are much higher. They're in the 1.6 range. So from a relative, I don't think it means they're ticked off in the middle. I think it means they're ticked off at the bottom. but I think it means that they're not as happy as they could be. Maybe that's looking at the glass as half full rather than half empty, but I think it suggests that there's some work to be done.
Yeah, because they're not even somewhat satisfied.
Well, don't think of this chart as saying exactly an average, because there are negative responses too. I mean, it is one way of looking at it, and that's correct, but it's the percentages. I mean, if you look at the bottom of tier 3, fun, bike, and pedestrian connections to ferry and transit hubs, that's 56% at least somewhat satisfied. So it's a majority of people are somewhat satisfied with that. And the ranking, while it's very nuanced and shows the comparison, it sometimes washes over that majority that we still have there. So it's not horrible. I mean, I don't want to say it's great, because it's not. But I don't want to make it seem too negative either.
And I appreciate your project.
So Commissioner Sears, Commissioner Kellner, Commissioner Donnell, and that's all that we bank will hold at this point.
So, Brian, what do we think these somewhat satisfied folks are, given the difficulty of getting people to answer their landline? Do you have a sense of the demographics that are responding?
Well, the sample as a whole is reflective of the voter universe, and this is among the entire likely November 16 universe.
So even given the challenges you're confident?
Yes, yeah. Because of the stratified nature of our sample, even though we don't get somebody with a landline, we're starting to replace those people with cell phones, but they're the same age, gender, partisanship, same part of the county, all of those other demographic areas. So, but to answer your question more specifically, I don't know exactly who the dissatisfied people are yet.
Yeah.
Part of our full analysis will actually look at those sorts of things, and we'll find out, is it an area of the county, is it an age group, and answer that question.
Super, great, thank you.
Commissioner Kellner.
So I had a question, Brian, on page 12. So this 67.6, 67, the two different options here, this is the language that you used?
That's the actual ballot question language, and it's similar to what you might actually do with a ballot question. Now, it's not an expenditure plan, it's not the full text of the resolution, but it's what appears actually, or it's analogous to what appears on the ballot question.
And just a second, I'll ask that in a second. So what you did was you took what you got out of this last one, where you highlighted everything in red, and kind of used that as your basis. I'm trying to, I'm looking at my papers here. It's on page 11.
Oh,
You're kind of using this, right? This one.
No, actually not. I mean, this was just a list of all of the transportation services that we wanted to test and see if people were satisfied and how important they were. We did turn a little bit of that into some of the bullets here, and then we've got the subsequent slides started flipping around. It has all of the things that we might spend money on, which is maybe a little bit of a wish list, but we wanted to find out how important they all are. If this was a true revenue measure survey, and the next thing we're going to do is go to a ballot measure, we would use this list to reprioritize the bullets in there.
So that might mean, because Dan was just asking, the second bullet point here is about traffic congestion on our local roads, which isn't really getting to the big concern that a lot of us have, especially the further north you go, which is 101.
And that would be if we were using this data to rewrite a ballot question and put it on the ballot, that would be the first thing that we would suggest, is that we have to be focusing on one. Now, I think you're right that there is a north-south dynamic. I don't have that analysis done yet, but I will do that.
And then how does this compare what you're, kind of the part two of your work here with what you're finding in other areas, or what maybe your fellow surveyors out there are finding in other areas that you're considering about transit revenue measure?
I think this is pretty good. I think that Contra Costa is not moving forward with their sales tax this year for transportation. I haven't seen the actual survey, but the fact that they're not suggests that they're substantially below this number. think Alameda is moving forward, right? So they're, and I haven't seen their data, you might have seen that as well, but I think that probably suggests that they're at 67 or maybe even 70. I would think Alameda would be doing better in terms of cost anyway. So I think this is a good place to begin. I think obviously there's an expenditure plan that you need to put together and those sorts of things. So there's some work to do. But I think it's a great place to start.
Thank you. Commissioner DeVille?
I was just curious on the one on the page 9 about how the questions were asked there of the satisfaction. Was it, are you satisfied with how the county is spending money on crossing guards, or was it, are you satisfied with the efforts at working with crossing guards? Just the way, I'm just curious about the wording.
Yeah. I'm not sure I actually have the exact wording here. I've got the exact wording in the individual items. So it's, in general, it is, how satisfied are you with these features, options, or services?
That are being funded by?
We don't even talk about that.
Okay.
Just how satisfied are you with these options, facilities, and services? And don't talk about the money, because this was the satisfaction part.
Right.
When we get to that later question, and the list is similar, then we did say, if you knew the money was going to go to this, would you be more likely to support it? So that's where we brought in the money part of it. And then we said, are you satisfied or dissatisfied? Then got an answer, and then said, is that barrier somewhat satisfied?
Okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that? So, Ryan, I'm curious also about this slide and the same thing. How do you ask them the question, when the questions that begin with fund, bus, bike, and pedestrian connections? Because to me, how satisfied are you with funding for? Is that what you
funding
ask?
for. Yeah, these are summaries because they won't all fit on this line if we have the full text. The full text is certainly available, but yes, the correct gerunds and those sorts of things are missing here. They're just not fit. Little details, ing.
We just haven't heard that word yet today.
Gerund.
Or this year.
Just a simple clarification for my own understanding. If I read this chart correctly, the item most your respondents were most dissatisfied with have to do with reducing traffic congestion on Highway 101.
That's right.
And then go to the other slide where you had items organized in such a way that, well, there was another one, that one, where the lead item, top item, where you could go out for asking for more public funds. If you were to lead with the top item, reduce congestion on Highway 1, that's the most likely item to be most effectively.
So
the question.
Right, that's correct. The first question that we looked at was, how satisfied are you with these things? This question is, how, if you knew that the money would be spent on this, how likely would you be to support the sales tax?
I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
Yeah. So, and that sort of makes sense, that they're really dissatisfied with, on one hand, and on the other hand, they're saying, wow, if the money's going to that, then I'm really supportive of the sales tax. Because it solves their issue.
What would you spend it on?
Any further questions or comments from this?
Well, I'm looking at this. It kind of strikes me that several of these items appeal to a particular type of person. You know, seniors are probably more likely to be interested in supporting Whistle Stop Wheels, although all of us are aging and all of us should consider that important. But now Safe Routes to School might appeal to, you know, younger people, middle-aged, maybe with kids. So if you think about likely voters, I'm just wondering if you have any data that's probably much more detailed than obviously the summary you're giving us, but any information about that would help us to tailor, you know, the way we may pursue this in the future, understanding what the individual demographics are saying about these different categories.
And that's going to, that is in the crosstabs that we've done, the detailed detailed cross-tabulation of about 1,000 pages. It'll be in the report where we do see significant differences. We will talk about that, but just to highlight the demographics that you're referring to, of the likely November 2016 voters, 67% of them are 50 and older. So that's why the senior items in here are important, because most of the voters are already thinking about it.
And they're the ones who still answer their phones, their landlines.
Actually,
They go, oh, goody, a phone call.
65 plus still do. Those of us in the 50 to 64 category, we
If you have
stop.
caller ID, yes, you say.
50 is the new 40.
I like to think so.
I've always said
Someone
that.
just had a birthday.
Yes, it ended in 0.
So
Just on this topic, when we set up our vehicle registration plan, we paid very close attention to the voter pool. And we set up the categories to align with what the voter pool was telling us. We got the highest percentage passing of any county in the area. So it's something that we need to pay attention to, definitely, if we were to pursue something in the future. And it worked. That theory of linking those things worked well for our VRF.
I just want to say, I think you can get the money, but if you don't have a project to spend the money on, such as reducing congestion on 101, then, that's a little bit of false advertising.
Any further questions or comments from the commission? Yes, Gary.
I just wanted to say that we had a presentation in the City Council, some presentation by Andy talking about a measure that's potentially coming for the Assembly, increasing the sales tax in Marin County. And our council had some reservation about endorsing that provision. It wasn't so much any of the issues, we certainly support many of them, actually all of them. Our concern was there was a lack, it was presented under the time variance, failing the time variance, a lack of a specific plan, and so we said that we were in favor of carte blanche. In essence, reserving that 0.25% for transportation, so that if somebody came in with child issues or some others, it would be preemptive. So I just want you to know that we are certainly in favor of that. I suspect many and all of us. But from Senate Bill's standpoint, we felt we should have a plan for us that we could then judge the merits of it. So just so you know.
Steve, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to touch base on that. First, thank you for presenting this. I think this is good information for us to have at any time that we're trying to think about what to do. The question I would have for you would be, Brian, would be, are there other techniques that other communities are using in addition to or in lieu of this kind of polling to dig deeper into public outreach, public support, public understanding, and obviously understanding by the policymakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this gives you the best quantitative approach, but there's certainly qualitative approaches like focus groups that you could get into this issue about what are you going to do on 101, for example, and what do people expect you to do. That's not a good question for a survey because it would take them a half hour to answer, and they would probably go back and forth. So there are certainly qualitative things like focus groups that you can do. Workshops are a little less of a research technique, but one that, as Diane referred to the VRF measure, there were a lot of workshops associated with that expenditure plan. And that's something that counties that are doing tax measures do definitely get into.
Yeah, so I would say, to some of the points that were made about the different types of constituencies that we have, we may want to budget in the course of our development of an expenditure plan for more than just polling to keep getting these abstract views of did we get it right, but more to find a way to get different constituencies to weigh in and bring them along in the process.
And I think one of the constituencies that's critical, and you've all mentioned it here, and I'm sure you all know it, is north, south, central sort of analysis. So when you're doing we will look at that in the quantitative data, but when you're doing focus groups, it's critical to make sure that you listen to what the South folks are saying in the Central and the North.
I always listen to the West.
And the West, which is a focus group, but everybody is.
It's a quiet, small group of folks, but, okay.
It can make a lot of noise.
Thank you. And then just the other question I want to ask had to do with Gary's point about the increase in the sales tax. Maybe you could explain, Diane, where we are. Are we at the wall? Do we need a change before we can ask at all? If we don't go this fall, do we have a little bit of time, and could we be moving forward on a more specific plan at the same time that we pursue that?
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to, thanks. The current statute states that increases on a first-come, first-served basis incur up to 2% above the level of state sales tax. The state sales tax is 7.5%. So there's a 2% availability in any local city, county, or town levying an increase in the sales tax. Right now, and we did an inventory for you at the TAM board meeting in June, we have several jurisdictions at 9%. Now remember, 9.5 is our cap before we would need special legislation. San Rafael's at 9.25. They're the highest in the county. So assuming that the early childhood development proceeds and this is passed, San Rafael will be at the cap. They'll be at 9.5. So for us to consider any kind of an increase above that, we would need special legislation. Around the Bay Area, a number of counties have gotten and received approval by the governor through the legislative process for special legislation allowing an increase. I, as the mayor stated, did a presentation to the council on this in Santa Fe. And they expressed interest, but with the understanding they would need to understand what's included. And so that's one of the steps we would need to go through to be able to enact a tax. There is a timing issue with when that happens. Most counties around the state do that the year before, and then the following year they put the tax on the ballot. Can you do it in the same year? Maybe. It gets thorny because of when the ballot has to be registered, 88 days before Election Day, which is about the first week of August, and when the governor might sign something like this. So you got a little bit of scheduling to work out, and that's one of the issues we would have to take up in a little more detail.
And has Assemblymember Skinner talked about whether she wants to move hers in a more expanded way this year or keep it a district?
We actually, after our discussions with San Rafael, did not obviously pursue any kind of a cap issue. There is a bill by Assemblymember Skinner, co-sponsored by Senator Lonnie Hancock, for Contra Costa County and the city of El Cerrito both, and that is proceeding through legislative approval.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments from the council? Yes, Dan.
This is a question. First, it's a request from staff to get some information for me. Given the number one item on this list, as well as the item on this list, providing the most dissatisfaction being the 101 congestion issue, I would like to get a quick update for myself, but I think probably the board would be a good idea, maybe just a memo that cites the status of TAM board's policy on studying a 101-580 connection. It was built from a consensus of the working group that the chair formed. I'll tell you the correct year that took place, but in last year, a 6-month study group session, out of which a key recommendation was to study a 101-580 connector, to which we were informed that MTC was not interested in studying and funding studies, but Supervisor Kinsey committed, I believe, at one of the meetings that he would find a way to bring that topic back at the right time for the next round of funding. Now, just to try to connect to the good work group showing us here prior to our formal meeting. Mayor Phillips and I were having some discussions. He was providing me some information that I should have, which was helpful. But I also asked him if he'd be willing to have a joint city council meeting with the city of Centerville and the city of Larkspur. The city of Larkspur offered to host that meeting. Steve was standing there, and I believe we were at least smiling in support of such a gathering of elected officials to discuss this important issue. And at this meeting, I'll ask Steve Rice to help me find the right venue for this. It might be Marin Catholic High School Gymnasium along with Francis Drake, so we can get the most people that are interested in this issue there to hear what we have to say about defining the problem correctly and just what options there are at looking to studying it. And I would also ask Mayor Phillips to invite any private property interests that might be involved to come to that meeting so that we can get as many people in one place at one time to kind of build on what the hearing the public say is their number one concern. Probably the most likely thing that might help support if we have some for additional lines in the future. So that's my comment on the item, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure you would like to have this discussion offline.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that we're thinking about this as well.
Thank you.
It's very important.
You know, if I might, not to get into a dialogue, but I want to just point out that if we're talking about 101 congestion, you know, we have two areas where we have tremendous congestion in the south and in the north. We've heard that the Narrows, we have a $180 million shortfall or something like that to finish even what we've planned there. So we're also going to have some kind of, if we're going to get into conversations on the 101, we're going to have a conversation about our prioritization within the 101 all the way. So we wouldn't be able to capture it in just one sort of regionalized conversation.
Thank you very much. Are there any further comments or questions? This is an informational item. Thank you very much. Public has a question?
Yes, thank you. Steve Lamson and Selma. In looking at this list, just an observation mainly, I'm sure there's a question in here somewhere, but the substance of the first item versus all of the other items. All of the other items are fairly specific and fairly easy to visualize, but the first one, reduced congestion, is a very nebulous concept, and actually probably the reason that you're all here and the reason that there is this organization. And it's, that's, my concern is what are the specific measures to do that? And that's where you have a lot of different people in the county that have different thoughts and different opinions about how to do that. So, like I said, that's just an observation. In the sales tax measure, Commissioner first mentioned, it's easy for someone to say, oh yeah, I would like to give more money to Whistle Stop Wheels. Or I like the safe route, so I'm in favor of that. But when you bring in the congestion part, that's, again, each person is going to have a different picture of what that actually means. So just a thought.
Thank you. This is an informational item. I bring it back now to the commission and thank Brian Dobby for his presentation. And now, if there are no further comments, I'm sure you'll allow me to adjourn. We are going into closed session, yes. The Transportation Authority of Marin met in closed session to evaluate our executive director. There is nothing to report out at this time. Thank you. We are dismissed.